everybody, it's Tara, and today I want to talk to you about some of the books I hope to reread in 2019. I am a big rereader. I love rereading my old favorites over and over again, and I love rereading books for a second time, knowing everything that happens, so now I can catch all the little hints and foreshadowing that go over your head the first time. But in 2018, in the interest of expanding my horizons a little bit, I made a goal for myself to not reread, except for one book in particular, and that is the only book that I reread this year. I was a total success for that goal. Very proud of myself. But 2019 will be a whole different story because early 2019, I'm gonna have a baby. And with a baby, you don't have a lot of time or energy or brain power. So it makes it a great year to reread some old favorites because it takes a lot less of that stuff than reading new books does. Also, I know that rereading old favorites is going to be time well spent. I'm going to enjoy reading them. I won't be risking wasting the precious few minutes that I do have on reading a book I might not end up liking. I don't expect to get to all of these books next year, but when I do need something to read, this is going to be the pool that I choose from. Honestly, I'm going to be happy if I get to even one of these books next year. If I can read one book next year, that'll be a successful year. The first book that I want to reread in 2019 is kind of an exception to that whole I know it's going to be time well spent thing, because this isn't a comfort read, this is a reevaluation of whether or not I still love it. And that book is Bridget Jones's Diary by Helen Fielding. If you have somehow never heard about Bridget Jones's Diary before, it is the diary of a British woman in her 30s who is struggling with her career, her relationships, her family, her drinking, her weight, struggling with a whole lot of stuff, really. I think I was 18 or 19 the first time I read Bridget Jones's Diary, so I was at a very different point in my life than Bridget is in hers in this book. And even though she does struggle a lot with those aspects of her life, they were aspects that I didn't have in my life. I didn't have any kind of career. I hadn't been in any serious relationships yet, so it was still fascinating and interesting and exciting to someone too young to have gone through any of it yet. I have reread this book many times over the years and I've always loved it, but this year I read its sequel, Mad About the Boy. It's set about 20 years later, so Bridget's now in her early 50s, and she's still struggling with the exact same things, and she's still basically the exact same person. She hasn't changed at all in 20 years. And I hated that book. I hated Bridget in that book. I hated her flakiness and her immaturity and irresponsibility. And I did realize that she was exactly the same in this book. So I want to reread Bridget Jones's Diary to see if I still love it now that I am the same age as Bridget is in this book, a little bit older, even though I'm in a different point of my life because I am married, I have 2 kids, I don't have a career, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I'm still not gonna really relate to what Bridget is going through in this book. But I want to see if Bridget herself and her experiences themselves are still something that I can enjoy and love, or if it's just going to irritate me as much as it all did in Mad About the Boy. I hope that I will still enjoy it because I'll be really sad to take this book off of my favorite shelf after almost 20 years of being on there, but I have a feeling it might be time to come down. The next 2 books I definitely want to get to in 2019 are A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons by George R.R. Martin. These are books 4 and 5 of the A Song of Ice and Fire series. If you're not familiar with A Song of Ice and Fire, you are probably familiar with Game of Thrones, which is the show that was based on this incredible series. It's an epic fantasy all about war and politics and magic and dragons and supernatural beings who can raise the dead and are building an army to take over the world. There's a lot going on in this series. I want to reread these 2 books in the hope that book 6, The Winds of Winter, will finally be released in 2019 or in 2020, now that Game of Thrones is coming to an end itself. And I want to read these 2 books in particular because they are so different from where the show has gone with the story. The show just basically threw them out and did its own thing. So I want to refresh my memory with everything that happened in those 2 books before I move on to book 6. I was planning on reading them in January and February before the baby got here because these are hefty books. They take a lot of focus and a lot of time. So I wanted to get it done early on in the year. But I just literally an hour ago heard the announcement for the A Song of Ice and Fire read-along that is being hosted by Ashley from Don't Have a Degree in Reading, along with 4 other booktubers. I will link them all down below. And they're starting in January, but they're reading all 5 books. So they won't be getting to A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons until August, I believe. So I'm going to put it off until August. Surely I'll be able to read each of these books in 2 months each. Surely I can pull that off, right? The funny thing about these two books is that they are set concurrently, but the POVs are split between them. So you have half the POVs and half the storylines in A Feast for Crows, and then the other half in A Dance with Dragons. And I didn't really love how that read. So this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to recombine the two books. I'm going to be reading them at the same time. There are a lot of orders to read the chapters in that were put together by different sites. The one I'm going to be using was done by boiledleather.com, and I will link that down below for you if you want to read this format as well for the Song of Ice and Fire read-along. Basically, it just puts everything all back together, but still in a timeline that makes sense with the story. I think I will enjoy it a lot more than having everything split, because I hated focusing only on certain storylines in one book and then only certain storylines in the other book. I don't know why George did that. I don't know. The next 4 books and series on this list are ones that I've only ever read once, but that one reading was enough to earn them a spot on my favorite shelf. And I'm not going to have a whole lot to say about why I want to reread these books. Basically just to enjoy them all over again and to pick up on anything that I might have missed the first time around. And the first book in that category is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is a historical fantasy about a man and a woman who are each masters of their own brand of magic, and they've been unknowingly pitted against each other in a contest to see whose brand of magic is greater. And the stage for that contest is a dark and mysterious and magical circus which Celia and Marco have created together in trying to outdo each other. I read this a few years ago and I've wanted to reread it ever since. This year especially, I've been watching so much BookTube, and so much love for this book is all over BookTube, and every time I heard someone talk about it, it made me want to read it again even more, so I really hope that I can get to this one in 2019. Next up is The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. Half of the story centers around a young Jewish woman named Sage, whose elderly friend Joseph confesses that he was a Nazi, and he asks for her help in ending his own life. The other half is from the perspective of Sage's grandmother, who's telling her story about how she survived the Holocaust and how she's connected to Joseph. I am not a big historical fiction reader, and half of this book is historical fiction, but I was so compelled by Sage's grandmother's story. It was fascinating and riveting and heart-wrenching and just beautiful, and I loved it so much that it made The Storyteller my second favorite of Jodi Picoult's then 20, I believe, novels. That's how great it was. Most of Jodi Picoult's books end with a big plot twist, and Storyteller is no exception. It's got a big plot twist at the end, so I'm really interested to see how knowing that will change my experience of reading the story. The next books that I hope to reread in 2019 are the entire Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. You all know what the series is about. There are 4 parallel worlds. There's a dangerous sentient magic threatening to destroy it all. There's a magician and a thief and a prince, and just so much awesome. I first read the series in 2017 and fell head over heels in love with it, as I'm sure many people do, and again after hearing so much love for the series on BookTube this year, it's made me want to reread it so badly. There's so much to love about the series. The story itself is incredible. The characters are great. The relationships between them, also great. The world building blew my mind. The magic system, everything. I loved it all so much, and I can't wait to love it all over again. I don't know if I'll be able to get to the entire series because it is a long one, but if I can just reread the first book, A Darker Shade of Magic, which is my favorite book of the series, if I can get to that one, I'll be happy. Next is another entire series, and that series is the Illuminae Files series by Amie Kaufman and Kristoff. And you guys know all about the series too. It's an epic space adventure with a great side of horror and a crazy AI, and it's told in a mixed media format that I didn't think I would be all that into, but I ended up being really into. This time I plan to read the series in an entirely different format, and that will be in audiobook. I am not an audiobook person, but if there is one book or series I think I'll really enjoy in that manner, it's the Illuminae Files series, because everybody on BookTube says how great the audiobooks are, that it's a great way to experience the story, that the format the books are written in translates so well to the audiobook format, so I actually really look forward to listening to these in audiobook. This is one series I do want to reread or re-listen to in its entirety, even though it probably will take a long time in audiobook, longer than reading the physical books did, but I want to get the full experience of all 3 books in audiobook. The next book is purely a comfort read, and that is Oh no, it's hanging on by a thread. I need to tape this back together. Ah. Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews. This is a classic gothic horror novel about 4 children whose mother locks them away to keep their existence a secret from her disapproving father so that she can inherit his fortune when he dies. This is an old favorite of mine. It is one of my first favorite books of my life. The first time I read it, I was 11, and I've read it almost every year since then, and every single time I love it just as much as I did the first time. I haven't read it since 2016, shortly after my son was born, so I think it's really fitting to read it again in 2019, shortly after my daughter is born. Because I've read this book so many times and because I love it so much, I think it will be a great help in those first few months after I have the baby, because you just go crazy those first few months, and this will just feel like cuddling up in a warm blanket and just being at home. It's going to be that comfort read that I need to keep me grounded. And last but not least, does it really need saying, the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. These weigh like 20 pounds, oh my god. There's just no better comfort reading than Harry Potter, is there? I haven't loved Harry Potter for nearly as long as I've loved Flowers in the Attic, but it is a much nicer story, it's a much happier story, and every time I read it, it makes me happy. It fills me with such light and love and happiness, and I think that's really going to be valuable to have next year. If I don't get through the entire series in 2019, I'll definitely carry it over into 2020 because it has been way too long. I haven't reread the entire series since before my son was born. And like I said in my video last week, Harry Potter means so much more to me now that I am a mother myself. And I think I'm going to love it on a whole new level because this is the first time I'm going to be reading the entire series as a mother. So there's just going to be this whole other aspect of the story that I never really appreciated before, and I can't wait to appreciate it now. So there you have it, the books that I want to reread in the craziness that 2019 will be for me. Will I get to all of them? No. Will I get to some of them? Fingers crossed. That is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down below what books you're going to be rereading in 2019. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy reading everybody. Bye-bye. Are you done scratching on your scratch post? Apparently not. Do you have to be playing with that toy right now, Lila? Then they all pick up in Seriously, cat. Seriously.